Welcome to ILTACON, a beautiful outside of Washington, D.C. You really can't call this Washington, D.C., but
not quite.
We're here at the Gaylord. We're talking with Scott Kelly from NetDocs, who's really one of the smartest people in legal tech and also a do-gooder, so put smart people and do-gooder together, and that makes for a great combination. So welcome, Scott, and why don't you tell people that don't know as much about you, your background, and what you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. My background is I was an attorney a long time ago in a galaxy far away, a civil rights attorney at the ACLU. After that, I started a legal tech company and ran that for about 6 years. We were in kind of like process and document automation, maybe for some of you legal tech geeks, After Pattern, also known as Community Lawyer. We had a couple different names over the years. And then we were acquired by NetDocs, and I've been at NetDocs for the last, it's now over 4 years. I'm somehow mathed out to 5 ILTACONs, so do the math. I don't know how that works.
That's a unit of measure, I think.
Yeah, there you go. And come full circle. This is my first ILTACON, and this is now where I am again. So, and at NetDocs, I lead our AI search and automation product portfolio. So
good. And so tell a little bit about like what are your day-to-day, how are you really figuring out how things can be found and how you can automate things?
Yeah, no, it's been an amazing journey for us as a company. I think about 3 years ago, like a lot of legal tech companies, we had a moment where like, I think there's a real there with this technology. I think this is a true platform shift that we're about to experience. And there's just so many applications, as you know, and with public data, same thing with private data. There's so many useful insights and pieces of data that are just floating out there in your document management system, but for so long it was kind of inaccessible, either because search was bad or the way the metadata fields were set up was insufficient, and frankly it stayed kind of inert and dead inside of the DMS. And so a big part of the journey for us at NetDocs has been like, how do we bring that insight out? How do we unlock your precedent to really turbocharge you as a user? And then how that shifted, I think, in a really interesting way is how do we get the DMS ready for not just your users, but the users of the future, which are agents, right? Have an agent-ready DMS, and that's been a big part of the work we've been doing at NetDocs.
That's great, and really your career has spanned both the old world of symbolic AI, that is a good old-fashioned AI, and coding, and then there's the new world of neural nets. And so maybe you could talk about, maybe take us chronologically how important metadata and that kind of thing is in symbolic AI, and how that gets augmented with the neural net AI.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting, truth, I think, of this new world that we're in, where I think a lot of folks are ready to say, oh, well, why do we even need metadata? Why do we even need any of this stuff we used to care about? And what you find is actually, if you have the right metadata, it actually unlocks the power of these agents. So like one really straightforward use case is deep research, right? Deep research is a really powerful capability that you see in the likes of ChatGPT and Claude, and increasingly in legal-specific agents, to go search over a corpus of documents or the web, whatever you're pointing it at, and surface the right information. But if you do just a pure semantic search, what you're going to find is your results aren't very good, the answers you're getting back from deep research aren't very good. What you need to do is combine the best of both worlds. You need to be able to run a semantic search, but also pair that with fine-grained metadata filters. So you could say, I just want to look at documents of this type in this jurisdiction over this date range. And oh, by the way, I'm also going to hit it with semantic search. And that's what we're so excited about at NetDocs, is we brought that to our customer base. You can now take 30 million documents and your custom taxonomy, and you can run auto-profiling over that and get the right metadata you want associated with the documents. So your DMS is now ready for an agent to traverse it. And you can also, and we're a couple months away from this, do semantic search, hybrid search over your lexical key terms and the conceptual meaning of your documents to get to that correct insight,
That's great, and a lot of people call that neural symbolic AI, that is connecting the neural net with the symbolic AI to be able to do the best, that either one of both of them together is better than either of them separately. It's kind of the gestalt.
Yeah.
And we've talked about, that's kind of retrieval side. Could you also talk about how maybe you can now, the old world you needed to have humans tag things, but now these days you can be able to have the machines, the neural nets, maybe tag more quickly and perhaps more accurately than the humans have in the past. Can you talk about about the tagging process and how that's changed.
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty interesting. So the old kind of approach was either you had humans doing the tagging, or you had kind of a traditional ML model that would go and you'd pre-train it on the entities that you cared about and maybe the types of documents it should expect to ingest, and that was an okay approach. And I think there was a moment at the beginning of this kind of platform shift where it was like, well, maybe there's going to be a space for kind of traditional ML approaches to tagging documents. And I think what we've seen just brick by brick, day by day, is that these models, these foundational models, are getting so much better in along all the areas that you care about. So they're getting more, cost efficient, they're getting faster, and they're getting more accurate. And so what we're seeing is, you can point a, GPT we use like 4.1 mini is a good model, I would say, for extraction. And across the vast majority of use cases, all you need to do is describe what you want, give it a definition, and point it. And you're going to get really high quality results back. Now, depending on how you're using that data, you might need to benchmark it, you might need to measure your accuracy. But we're seeing really, really good results. I don't know what you're seeing.
I'm also seeing really, really, and this is the worst the technology will ever be. The 5 just came out, 6 will come out, and of course Google, which has been the king of search forever, is now, Gemini is arguably the best in the world.
Yeah.
So I don't think that the foundational models are going to slow down anytime soon. So 4.1 mini is the best today, but what's the best tomorrow?
Yeah.
And so, of course, the capabilities are one vector, and the other vector is cost, which is dropping. So maybe could you talk about, as intelligence gets better and as cost goes down at the same time, where are we headed with being able to do things with a corpus like NetDocuments has?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a moment of truth for a lot of our customers where we show them this capability and they're like, wait a minute, I can pull out all of this information from the DMS. We need to totally revisit what actual metadata fields we have. And so we see customers now, they're going through a whole process internally where they're like, now that we know that this is possible, we have to revisit what we're even thinking about pulling out. Maybe we look at a Sally or a Folio, or maybe, in a lot of cases it's a different turn on that kind of standard. Maybe they've winnowed it down to their practice areas that they care about, and they're augmenting, because before there was sort of this feeling that look, if we're going to have busy attorneys and paralegals filling out these profiles, it's just not going to happen, so we're going to really restrict it. And so they kind of narrowed their vision, and now we're seeing that vision really expand to what do we really want to know about our documents?
And let's talk about the kind of homegrown taxonomies, because I with Sally and Folio, I've mapped many law firms' taxonomies to Sally and Folio, and a lot of law firms will have things like SEC investigations and enforcement in the UK or in Texas or right. So that's one tag, but of course those are many tags. The SEC is a tag, enforcement is a tag, investigation is a tag, and Texas is a tag. So a lot of firms kind of have their Frankenstein-y tags that really they need to be kind of unfrankensteined into their component parts. Can you say you've seen many customers' taxonomies, and you've seen probably good ones and less good ones. Can you say what is a better taxonomy versus a less good taxonomy?
Yeah, I think the best taxonomy is the one that actually is valuable to the frontline workers, right? It's what am I actually trying to find on my on a day-to-day basis? What kind of precedents? What do I care about? And we've seen the most successful firms are the ones who have engaged deeply with the practitioners in different departments and said, what do you care about? And in some cases that may be they just want 5 doc types, and others might look at that and be like, oh my gosh, but why not do 200 or 300? But they find that no, they really just care about bucketing things in that way, and it works for them. I think where firms can sometimes get in trouble is where there's this kind of siloing of the KM function from the frontline service delivery function. And so you kind of get all this ideation on this level of people being like, oh, what if we did that? What if we did that? And they roll out this taxonomy. And then the attorneys who are actually using it day to day are like, this isn't helpful to me. This doesn't help me do work. I think now you have to take that a step further. And it's how can you help agents do work? One of the things you've probably seen in your testing is if you give agents too many filters, they can be overly restrictive in how they run searches and trying to drill down on the right thing. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes the art of unlocking an agent and its potential is saying, what are the 5, 6, or 7 attributes that we actually want it searching on. And all that other stuff we're using for driving, reporting, retention, other things, but we certainly don't want the AI futzing around and trying to filter on it because they're going to miss so much key insight. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I really like the insight about the knowledge innovation need to be closely bound with the end user because the use cases are everything.
Yeah.
And so if the end user were to say, hey, if you were asked them, what metadata fields do you think that you need, their eyes are going to glaze over and say, I don't know, 5, right?
Yeah.
But if you say, like, what buttons do you want or what drop-down menus would be helpful to you, then they'd be like, oh, I would love to do this. So even putting it in the UI kind of interface, like what buttons, it really is this idea of use cases to be able to then spark the idea. So I love the idea of you need to connect the knowledge folks with the frontline people. So let's talk a little bit about like the user interface and how you're extracting the things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have 10,000 different metadata fields, that's really hard from a user interface to be able to say, no, I just want it simple, right?
Yeah.
But then you say, no, the lawyer says, no, I want it the really granular thing, right? So how do you balance simplicity with the complexity?
Yeah, I think it's a tough challenge. I don't think there's a right answer, for every firm. But what we found is basically, there's some firms that they're working with nothing really, and honestly, they don't want to go through the process of like talking to all these different departments and trying to figure out like what the right taxonomy is. And so in those cases, we just come to them and we have an applied AI team, and they'll just say, hey, here's a taxonomy that we've seen be helpful. And actually, we've mapped it to Folio, so it's not quite as large as that, but it's a subset.
Everybody has a subset,
right? And we mapped it to that, and we found that that's useful. But then we have a lot of firms that are like, you know what, we know exactly what we want, and we need the tool to allow us to map that and run a flow on that. And so that's where our process automation capabilities at NetDocuments really can help out. We have a no-code kind of like app builder. It's the year of app builders. Everybody's got one now, but we've had one for a long time. And
not agent?
Not agent, we find that people, they design very bespoke workflows where, for example, maybe they want to rename documents to fit with a certain convention, but that convention varies by office, or that convention varies by department, and they do things in a different way, and so they need a workflow tool that could deterministically evaluate, okay, this document has been profiled with this office, now, okay, let's look at the 4 corners of the document, pass that into an LLM, and use this like schema. Maybe it's like for a contract, it's like effective date, dash, the doc type, dash, a comma delimited list of the parties, and that's the name they want. But in a different department, it's a very different thing. You need a workflow tool to fine-grain map out those processes. At least that's our experience.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And really, I love talking about data with you, and knowledge graphs come up frequently. So as you have nodes, that is nouns, and you have relationships between those nodes, that is verbs. Maybe we can think about either, Google has knowledge graphs, Amazon has knowledge graphs, Facebook has knowledge graphs. Everybody's using knowledge graphs to be able to help search and to be able to help classify. Can you say either what you have in NetDocuments or what you're thinking through in the skunkworks of NetDocuments as to knowledge graphs and maybe how they fit into where we are or where we're headed?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think an important question because, for so long, knowledge graphs were this great idea, but in practice, like you really couldn't tap into that data unless you just had, everybody in lockstep profiling their documents the right way or mapping things the right way in their experience management system, whatever it was, for tracking those relationships. But now that you have these tools that can go through and understand what's in a document, you can go beyond these kind of like flat hierarchies of like, oh, they're all this doc type, and you can start to relate things to like, okay, these documents relate to this matter, and this matter relates to this client, and this client is, related to this office, and you can start to put those pieces together. Not quite the verbs you're talking about, but at least the, the nouns,
properties,
starting there. And so creating that kind of like matter graph, we actually think is a crucial bit of context to be passing into agents so that they really understand not just the flat hierarchy of your documents or the flat hierarchy of your PMS, but actually what the matter means. We're not there yet. We do have great semantic search that we're rolling out. We do have this AI profiling capability, but I think the next step for us is how do you start to create that more fine-grained matter map and then embed that into agents so that they can really quickly traverse the matter and get to the real answers that you want them to get to.
I could talk with you for 8 hours, and I hope that someday we will, but sadly we're coming close to the end. I like to ask as a close, we're in unprecedented times, I think. What makes you optimistic? What makes you hopeful that we're going to be able to do much cooler things going forward?
What makes me optimistic? I mean, I think events like this actually make me really optimistic. I mean, here's a great example. Model Context Protocol, you asked like 95% of the people walking around here, like maybe 6 months ago, what that was, and maybe they wouldn't know what it was, they had no idea, but the rate of adoption of these concepts that seemed esoteric just 6 months ago, and now people are like, oh yeah, you got to have an MCP server set up to hook up your agent, not only to the search and fetch functions, but also to the tools you've built. And the future of search is you've got a model context server, MCP server over there and an MCP server over there for your private and your public data. And the fact that people are willing to embrace this change instead of like letting it wash over them, I think that makes me really encouraged for our industry, and that we're not sitting there and kind of burying our head in the sand. I think people know that this change is real and it's coming, and we got to be, a part of it, or else it's going to happen to us.
Absolutely. Well, kudos to ILTACON for putting together smart people, including one of the smartest people in legal tech sitting right here next to me. So Scott Kelly, it really has been a pleasure talking with you. I could honestly talk for hours. So thank you for joining us, and thanks for sharing some of your wisdom.
Yeah, really appreciate being here. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.